The flames crackled with hungry intensity, illuminating the midnight sky as Lucy Lawson's small cabin became a beacon of terror in the otherwise peaceful Montana wilderness. It was 1885, and in this unforgiving territory, a fire could mean certain death, especially for a woman alone. Samuel Reeves spotted the orange glow from 2 miles away as he rode through the valley. He'd been trailing a herd of wild mustangs for 3 days, sleeping under stars and tracking their movements through the rugged terrain. But the sight of flames sent his heart racing and his horse into a gallop without a second thought. Lucy awoke to the acrid smell of smoke filling her lungs. Coughing violently, she rolled from her bed, eyes burning as she tried to make sense of the chaos. The cabin, her home for the past 8 months since her father's passing, was engulfed in flames that seemed to dance with malevolent glee across the dry timber walls. "Help!" she screamed, though she knew there was no one to hear her. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and in the dead of night, with a storm brewing on the horizon, rescue seemed impossible. The flames licked at the roof beams, sending burning debris crashing down. Lucy scrambled toward the door, but a falling timber blocked her path, trapping her in a corner as the inferno grew. Her white cotton nightgown offered no protection from the heat, and her long chestnut hair was singed at the ends. Samuel pushed his horse harder than he ever had before. The animal seemed to sense the urgency, hooves thundering across the prairie as they closed the distance to the burning structure. As they approached, Samuel could hear screaming from within the cabin. Without hesitation, he leaped from his horse and rushed toward the blazing building. The heat was overwhelming, but the sound of a woman's cries drove him forward. The door was already partially consumed by flames, the wood weakened and charred. "Stand back," he shouted, though he had no idea if the woman inside could hear him. With a powerful kick, he splintered what remained of the door, sending it crashing inward in a shower of embers. Through the smoke and flames, Samuel spotted her, a young woman with terror in her eyes, trapped in the corner as the ceiling began to collapse. Without thinking, he charged through the flames, his leather duster offering minimal protection as embers burned holes through the fabric and seared his skin. "I've got you," he said, reaching Lucy and scooping her into his arms in one fluid motion. She clung to him, her body trembling as he turned and carried her through the burning doorway just as a support beam crashed down where she had been standing seconds before. Outside, the cool night air was a shock to their smoke-filled lungs. Samuel didn't stop until they were a safe distance from the cabin, setting Lucy gently on the ground beneath a large cottonwood tree. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the smoke, his blue eyes intense with concern as he scanned her for injuries. Lucy shook her head, then broke into another fit of coughing. "No, I don't think so," she managed between gasps. "Thank you, you saved my life." For the first time, they truly looked at each other. Lucy saw a tall man with broad shoulders, soot-darkened face, and kind eyes that seemed to reflect the dying flames of her home. Samuel saw a beautiful young woman with determination etched in her features, despite the tragedy unfolding before them. "Samuel Reeves," he said, offering his name along with his canteen. She took a long drink, the water soothing her parched throat. "Lucy Lawson," she replied, her voice steadier now. "My father's cabin, everything I have." They both turned to watch as the structure collapsed in on itself, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. Lucy's shoulders slumped, the weight of her loss settling upon her as the reality of her situation became clear. "I have nothing now," she whispered. Samuel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You have your life, Miss Lawson, and right now that's what matters most." As they sat beneath the cottonwood tree, watching Lucy's past burn to the ground, neither could have imagined how their futures had just become intertwined. Dawn broke over the Montana landscape, revealing the true extent of the destruction. Where Lucy's cabin had stood was now nothing but smoldering ruins, blackened timbers, and ash. She sat wrapped in Samuel's spare blanket, her nightgown singed and dirty, her face streaked with soot and dried tears. Samuel returned from checking his horse, bringing more water and a bit of jerky from his saddlebags. "It's not much," he said apologetically, "but it'll keep your strength up until we figure out what to do next." Lucy accepted the offerings gratefully. "I still can't believe you appeared when you did. Another minute and I would have." She couldn't finish the sentence, her throat tightening with emotion. "I was tracking mustangs," Samuel explained, settling beside her on a fallen log. "Saw the fire from the ridge. Anyone else live nearby? Family?" "Friends who might take you in," Lucy shook her head. "No family, not anymore. My father died last winter pneumonia. We came out here from Philadelphia after my mother passed. He wanted to start fresh." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Some fresh start." Samuel studied her closely. She was clearly educated, her speech refined despite her current state. Her hands, though dirty now, showed little evidence of the calluses that marked most frontier women, yet there was a resilience about her that intrigued him. "What about neighbors?" he pressed. "The Wilsons are about 5 miles east, but they left last month to visit relatives in Denver. Won't be back till autumn." Lucy poked at the ground with a stick, avoiding his gaze. "I suppose I could try to reach Silverdale. It's about 20 miles south, a small mining town. I might find work there." Samuel frowned. "A young woman alone in a mining town isn't the safest prospect, Miss Lawson." "Lucy," she corrected him. "After you've carried someone from a burning building, I think you've earned the right to use their given name." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Lucy, then." "And I'm Samuel, or Sam, if you prefer." For a moment they sat in companionable silence, the only sounds the occasional pop from the cooling ruins and the morning birds beginning their songs in the nearby trees. "I have a ranch," Samuel said finally. "It's not much, just getting started really. About 15 miles north of here. I could take you there, give you a place to stay until you decide what you want to do." Lucy's eyes widened. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," he interrupted. "It's the decent thing to do. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I could use the help. My housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, is getting on in years, and she's been saying she needs an extra pair of hands." Lucy studied him carefully. On the one hand, going with a stranger to his remote ranch could be dangerous. On the other, Samuel Reeves had just risked his life to save hers, and her options were severely limited. "I don't have anything," she said softly. "My clothes, my father's books, my mother's locket, it's all gone." Samuel stood, brushing dust from his pants. "We can see if anything survived the fire, and there's a general store in Timber Creek, not far from my place. We can get you what you need." After carefully searching through the ruins once they had cooled enough, Lucy managed to salvage very little. A cast iron skillet, blackened but still usable. A metal box containing her father's pocket watch and a few coins. And miraculously, her mother's Bible, which had been stored in a metal document case that had protected it from the worst of the flames, though the edges were singed. Lucy clutched these treasures to her chest as Samuel prepared his horse for their journey. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." Samuel helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. The feeling of his strong arms around her as he reached for the reins was both foreign and comforting. Lucy couldn't remember the last time she had been this close to a man who wasn't her father. As they rode away from the smoking ruins, Lucy allowed herself one last look at what had been her home. Then, turning to face forward, she made a silent promise to herself. She would rebuild her life one way or another. The journey to Samuel's ranch took most of the day. They rode in comfortable silence for stretches, then Samuel would point out landmarks or tell stories about the area. Lucy learned that he had come west 5 years earlier, drawn by the promise of open land and opportunity after serving briefly as a deputy in St. Louis. "I was never cut out for city life," he explained as they followed a creek through a valley of tall grass. "Too many people, too many rules. Out here a man can breathe." "Is that why you track wild horses instead of raising them yourself?" Lucy asked, curious about this man who had saved her life. Samuel chuckled, the sound rumbling against her back. "Partly. Wild mustangs have spirit like nothing else. Breaking them completely seems wrong somehow. I gentle them enough to work with, but I like leaving some of that wildness intact." By late afternoon, they crested a hill, and Samuel's ranch came into view below them. It was modest but well-maintained. A sturdy two-story house with a wide porch, a large barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse. Fields of hay stretched to the east and cattle grazed in the distance. "It's beautiful," Lucy said sincerely. "It's home," Samuel replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Built most of it myself with help from my ranch hands. Speaking of which," he gestured toward the barn, where a lanky young man had spotted their approach and was waving enthusiastically. As they rode into the yard, the young man jogged over to meet them. "Boss, we weren't expecting you back so soon, and with company, no less." His curious gaze landed on Lucy. "Tom, this is Miss Lucy Lawson. Her cabin burned down last night. She'll be staying with us for a while. Lucy, this is Tom Parker, my right-hand man despite his young age." Tom tipped his hat. "Madam, sorry to hear about your trouble." Before Lucy could respond, the front door of the house swung open, and a stout older woman in an apron emerged, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Samuel Reeves, is that you making a commotion when I've got bread in the oven?" Samuel dismounted and helped Lucy down from the horse. "Mrs. Finch, we have a guest who will be staying with us. This is Miss Lucy Lawson." Mrs. Finch's expression softened immediately at the sight of Lucy in her singed nightgown, wrapped in a blanket, face smudged with soot. "Lord have mercy, child. Come inside this instant." She shot Samuel a look that promised a full explanation would be required later, then guided Lucy toward the house. "Tom, take care of Drifter, would you?" Samuel called after them, referring to his horse. "And let the men know we'll be having a meeting after supper." Inside, the Reeves home was surprisingly comfortable. Simple but well-crafted furniture filled the rooms, with touches that spoke of care curtains at the windows, a quilt draped over a rocking chair, a vase of wildflowers on the dining table. Mrs. Finch led Lucy upstairs to a small but clean bedroom. "This was meant to be a sewing room, but it'll serve as your quarters for now. Let me find you something to wear. You're a bit slimmer than me in my younger days, but I've kept some things that might fit well enough until we can get you proper clothes." The older woman bustled about, producing a plain brown dress, undergarments, and a pair of worn but serviceable boots. "The washroom is down the hall. You go get cleaned up and I'll have these laid out for you, then food you look like you could use a good meal." Overwhelmed by the kindness, Lucy could only nod gratefully. The warm bath that followed was nothing short of heavenly. As Lucy scrubbed away the soot and smoke, she allowed herself to truly process the events of the past day. She had lost everything but her life, and that life had been saved by a stranger who was now offering her shelter. The enormity of it brought fresh tears to her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. Crying wouldn't rebuild what she had lost. Dressed in Mrs. Finch's old clothes, which fit surprisingly well with a few strategic pins, Lucy made her way downstairs. The smell of fresh bread and beef stew made her stomach growl, reminding her that she hadn't eaten a proper meal since yesterday. In the dining room, she found Samuel freshly washed as well, his dark hair still damp, wearing a clean shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. He stood when she entered, and something in his expression made her suddenly self-conscious. "You look better," he said, then winced slightly at his own words. "I mean rested. No, that's not right either. You look fed up with your stammering is how she looks," Mrs. Finch interrupted, bringing a large pot of stew to the table. "Sit down, both of you, before the food gets cold." Over dinner, Lucy explained her situation more fully, how she and her father had come west after her mother's death, how they had built the cabin together, and how she had managed alone these past 8 months by selling eggs and vegetables to travelers passing through. "It wasn't much of a life," she admitted, "but it was mine. Now I'm not sure what I'll do." "You'll stay here until you figure it out," Samuel said firmly. "No rush." Mrs. Finch has been complaining for months that she needs help, and we're heading into the busy season with calving and training the new horses. Mrs. Finch nodded approvingly. "The pay's fair, the work's honest, and no one will bother you here. Samuel runs a respectable operation." Lucy looked between them, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "I'd like that. I'm a quick learner and I'm not afraid of hard work." "It's settled then," Samuel said, his blue eyes meeting hers across the table. Welcome to Reeves Ranch, Lucy Lawson. That night, lying in a strange bed in a strange house, Lucy thought about how quickly life could change. Yesterday, she had been Lucy Lawson, daughter of a failed Philadelphia businessman turned frontier settler, living a solitary existence in a small cabin. Today, she was, what, a survivor. A worker. A woman whose path had unexpectedly crossed with that of Samuel Reeves, a man who seemed as solid and dependable as the mountains that framed his land. As she drifted toward sleep, the image of Samuel carrying her from the flames played in her mind. In that moment of crisis, she had felt utterly safe in his arms, a feeling she hadn't experienced since her father's death. It was a dangerous thought, she knew. Gratitude could easily be mistaken for other emotions. Better to keep her heart guarded and focus on rebuilding her life one day at a time. Lucy adapted to life at Reeves Ranch with surprising ease. The first few days were filled with learning the rhythms of the household, when meals were served, where things were kept, what routines governed daily life. Mrs. Finch proved to be a patient teacher, showing Lucy how to manage the larger kitchen and the increased cooking required to feed not only Samuel, but also the 4 ranch hands who took their meals at the main house. Most ranches have a chuck wagon and a dedicated cook, Mrs. Finch explained as she taught Lucy how to make biscuits in quantities sufficient to feed hungry men. Samuel prefers a more family-style approach, says it builds loyalty among the workers. Lucy kneaded the dough with practiced movements. He seems to have a different way of doing many things, Mrs. Finch chuckled. That he does. Most ranchers out here rule with an iron fist and a quick temper. Samuel believes in second chances and treating men like men, not hired guns or disposable labor. As promised, on her 3rd day at the ranch, Samuel took Lucy to the general store in Timber Creek, a small settlement about an hour's ride from the ranch. The town consisted of little more than the store, a saloon, a small church, and a handful of houses, but to Lucy, it represented connection to the wider world she had been missing during her isolated months at the cabin. "Get whatever you need," Samuel told her as they entered the store. "Clothing, personal items, put it on my account." Lucy started to protest, but Samuel held up a hand. "Consider it an advance on your wages. You can't work in borrowed clothes forever." The store owner's wife, a kind woman named Mrs. Harper, helped Lucy select several practical dresses, undergarments, a sturdy pair of boots, and a few personal necessities. While the women were occupied with these selections, Samuel browsed the store, returning with a hairbrush, a small bottle of lavender water, and a journal with a leather cover. "These two," he told Mrs. Harper, placing them on the counter with Lucy's other items. Lucy raised an eyebrow. "I can't accept luxuries," Samuel shrugged. "The brush is practical enough. The lavender water, well, a woman should have something nice after losing everything. And the journal," he hesitated. "You mentioned your father's books. Thought you might want something to write in. Keep your thoughts organized." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Lucy deeply. "Thank you," she said softly, her fingers tracing the tooled leather of the journal. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, a moment of understanding that felt both significant and fragile. On the ride back to the ranch, Lucy found herself studying Samuel's profile as he guided the wagon along the rutted dirt road. There was a quiet strength about him that she found increasingly compelling. Not the brash, showy masculinity she had sometimes observed in other frontier men, but something more substantial, a certainty in his actions and decisions that came from knowing who he was and what he stood for. "Tell me about your horses," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "The wild ones you were tracking when you found me." Samuel's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Mustangs are something special. Most folks see them as pests or just resources to be captured and broken. I see them differently." He went on to describe the herd he had been following, a magnificent black stallion leading about 15 mares and their foals through the high country. They're surviving against all odds out there, predators, harsh weather hunters, and still they run free. There's something about that spirit that calls to me. Is that why you came west? For that freedom?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, considering her question. Partly, my father was a factory foreman in Pittsburgh. Expected me to follow him into that life, working indoors, breathing coal dust, taking orders. I tried for his sake, lasted less than a year before I knew I'd suffocate if I stayed. My father was similar, Lucy admitted. He had a path all planned for me: marriage to his business partner's son, a comfortable life in Philadelphia society. Then, when his business failed and mother died, those plans collapsed. Coming west was his idea, but I embraced it. The thought of making my own choices, however difficult, was liberating. Samuel nodded in understanding. Seems we both needed room to breathe. Their conversation flowed easily for the remainder of the journey, finding common ground despite their different backgrounds. By the time they returned to the ranch, Lucy felt a growing warmth towards Samuel that went beyond gratitude for his rescue and generosity. That evening, after changing into one of her new dresses, a simple blue cotton that Mrs. Harper had assured her brought out the color in her eyes, Lucy joined Samuel on the front porch. The spring evening was mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine from the nearby hills. "Mrs. Finch has gone to bed," Lucy said, settling into a rocking chair beside him. "The kitchen is clean and breakfast preparations are ready for morning." Samuel nodded, smoking a pipe and gazing out at the darkening landscape. "You've taken to ranch life quickly." "It's not so different from what I was doing before, just on a larger scale," Lucy replied. "And it's nice to have company after so many months alone." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the rocking chairs and the distant lowing of cattle. "I've been thinking," Samuel said finally, "about your cabin." Lucy's chest tightened at the mention of her lost home. "What about it?" The location was good near water, sheltered by those cottonwoods, good soil. "Seems a waste to let the land go unclaimed now." He paused, tapping his pipe against the porch rail. "If you wanted, I could help you rebuild, not right away, but over time, a proper cabin better than before." Lucy was stunned by the offer. "Why would you do that?" Samuel met her gaze directly. "Because everyone needs a place that's truly their own. Working here gives you shelter and wages, but eventually, you might want independence again." The thoughtfulness of his consideration for her future left Lucy speechless. Most men would have either tried to keep her dependent or encouraged her to seek a husband for security. Samuel was offering her a path to self-sufficiency. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. Samuel shrugged. "Nothing to say now, just something to consider for the future." As the weeks passed, Lucy fell into the rhythm of ranch life, finding satisfaction in the structured days and varied work. Beyond her duties assisting Mrs. Finch, she discovered a talent for working with the horses. Samuel noticed her gentle way with the animals and began inviting her to help with the training of the younger horses. "You have a natural touch," he commented one afternoon, as Lucy successfully coaxed a nervous 2-year-old filly to accept a saddle for the first time. "Some people try to dominate horses. You communicate with them." Lucy stroked the filly's neck, pleased by both the animal's trust and Samuel's praise. "My mother always said I had more patience than sense. Seems it's finally useful for something." Samuel laughed, the sound warming Lucy in ways she was becoming increasingly aware of. Over the past month, her feelings for him had developed from gratitude into genuine affection, and perhaps something deeper that she was afraid to name. She wasn't the only one experiencing changing emotions. Samuel found himself looking forward to the evenings when they would sit on the porch after dinner, talking about their days or simply enjoying the quiet together. He noticed small details about Lucy, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, how her laugh started as a small sound before blooming into something joyful and uninhibited, the thoughtful way she treated everyone from Mrs. Finch to the youngest ranch hand with equal respect. One evening in late May, a violent thunderstorm rolled through the valley. The ranch hands secured the livestock and buildings before retreating to the bunkhouse, while inside the main house, Lucy, Samuel, and Mrs. Finch listened to the rain pounding on the roof. "Reminds me of that night," Lucy said quietly as lightning illuminated the sitting room where she was mending one of Samuel's shirts. Samuel, reading nearby, looked up. The fire, Lucy nodded. There was a storm brewing then too. I remember seeing lightning in the distance before I went to sleep. She set down her sewing. I've never asked what do you think caused it. The fire, I mean. Samuel closed his book. Hard to say for certain. Could have been a lightning strike earlier in the evening that smoldered before catching. Could have been a spark from your stove. Or it could have been deliberate, Mrs. Finch said from her rocking chair where she was knitting a scarf. Lucy and Samuel both turned to her in surprise. What makes you say that? Samuel asked, his voice sharp. Mrs. Finch shrugged. That valley where Miss Lucy's cabin was located is prime grazing land. The Harrington outfit has been trying to expand their range that direction for years. Your father refused to sell to them before he passed, didn't he, dear? Lucy nodded slowly. Yes, but surely they wouldn't. Wealthy ranchers have done worse to get what they want, Mrs. Finch said matter-of-factly. Just something to consider. A troubled expression crossed Samuel's face. Have the Harringtons been causing problems for anyone else lately? Heard they pressured the Wilsons something fierce before they left to visit their relatives, Mrs. Finch replied. Tom mentioned it last week, said they weren't so much visiting family as escaping threats. Lucy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. You think they might have burned my cabin to drive me off the land? Samuel stood, pacing the room. It's possible. The Harringtons have 4 sons, all with reputations for being hard men. Their foreman, Clayton, is even worse, rumored to have been a hired gun down in Texas before coming north. But I'm just one woman on a small homestead, Lucy protested. Why would they care so much about my little piece of land? Water rights, Samuel said grimly. Your creek feeds into the main river. Control that and you control access for miles around. The room fell silent except for the storm's fury outside. Finally, Lucy spoke again. If that's true, if they did this deliberately, then they're responsible for nearly killing me. And they might still be interested in that land, Samuel added, his jaw tight. Which means they might not be pleased to learn you survived. The next day dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed everything clean. Samuel was unusually quiet at breakfast, and immediately after, he asked Lucy to join him in his study, a small room off the main sitting area that contained a desk, bookshelves, and maps of the surrounding territory. I've been thinking about what we discussed last night, he said, closing the door behind them. About the Harringtons and your land. Lucy perched on the edge of a chair. And if they did burn your cabin, and I believe they might have, then we need to establish your continued claim to that property before they move in. He spread a map across his desk. Your father filed a proper claim, yes, Lucy nodded. Yes, everything was legal, the deed is. Her face fell. The deed was in the cabin, Samuel frowned. That complicates things, but not irreparably. There should be records in the county seat. I'll ride there tomorrow, see what can be done. I'll come with you, Lucy said firmly. It's my land, after all. Samuel looked as though he might argue, then nodded. Fair enough. It's a full day's ride each way, so we'll need to stay overnight in town. The trip to the county seat the following day was both productive and enlightening. The clerk at the land office was able to locate the records of Andrew Lawson's original claim, and for a small fee, provided a certified copy of the deed showing Lucy as the inheritor of the property upon her father's death. That's one problem solved, Samuel said as they left the office. Now no one can claim you abandoned the property, but their relief was short-lived. As they crossed the street toward the hotel where they planned to stay the night, a group of men emerged from the saloon. The largest of them, a red-faced man with a bushy beard, spotted them and nudged his companions. Well, look who's in town, he called out. Samuel Reeves, the horse whisperer. Samuel tensed beside Lucy. Richard Harrington, he said quietly to her, oldest of the Harrington boys. Lucy straightened her spine, acutely aware of the deed safely tucked in her handbag. Richard sauntered over, flanked by 2 equally rough-looking men. Heard you took an astray after that unfortunate fire out by Cottonwood Creek, he said, his eyes raking over Lucy with undisguised interest. This must be her, Miss Lawson is not astray, Samuel replied coldly, and the fire was indeed unfortunate, almost as if it was planned that way. Richard's eyes narrowed. Careful with accusations, Reeves. Accidents happen on the frontier, everyone knows that. Indeed they do, Lucy interjected, finding her voice. However, I've just secured a certified copy of my deed to that property, so any accidents meant to drive me away have failed. That land remains in my possession. The color in Richard's face deepened. Is that so? Well, a piece of paper doesn't mean much out here, especially to a woman alone. He stepped closer. Though I could be persuaded to make you an offer, might be safer than trying to rebuild on such dangerous land. Samuel moved subtly, positioning himself between Lucy and Richard. Miss Lawson isn't alone, and she's not selling. The tension between the men was palpable. For a moment, Lucy feared violence might erupt right there in the street. Then the town sheriff emerged from his office across the way, his presence enough to make Richard and his companions reconsider. This isn't finished, Richard muttered before backing away. Some advice, Miss Lawson, choose your friends carefully. Reeves here has made plenty of enemies by refusing to play by the rules the rest of us live by. As the Harrington men retreated to the saloon, Lucy released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Those are dangerous men, Samuel nodded grimly. Yes, they are, and now they know you're alive and still claim that land. Do you think they'll try something else? Almost certainly. The question is what and when. They secured rooms at the hotel for the night, though Lucy found sleep elusive. The confrontation with Richard Harrington had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. The casual menace in his manner, the way he had looked at her as if she were property to be acquired rather than a person with rights, it all confirmed her suspicions about the fire. The next morning, they set out early for the return journey to Reeves Ranch. The summer day was warming quickly, promising heat by midday. They rode in companionable silence for the first few miles, each lost in thought. Thank you, Lucy said finally, breaking the quiet, for standing with me yesterday, for helping me secure my claim. Samuel glanced over at her, his expression softening. You don't need to thank me for doing what's right. Nevertheless, I appreciate it. Not many men would support a woman's right to own property independently. She paused. Richard seemed to take it personally that you were helping me. Samuel sighed. The Harringtons and I have history. My methods of ranching, the way I treat my workers, my refusal to join their association, all of it rubs old man Harrington the wrong way, and his sons follow his lead. He mentioned enemies. Have they caused trouble for you before? Attempted to. Cut my fences once, tried to divert water from my creek. Samuel's jaw tightened. I caught the men responsible and gave them a choice: jail or returning to the Harringtons with a message that I wouldn't be intimidated. They chose the latter. Lucy studied his profile, impressed by his quiet strength. You're a good man, Samuel Reeves. He looked over at her, something warm in his gaze. I try to be. After a moment, he added, what will you do about your land now? Will you rebuild? It was a question Lucy had been pondering all night. I'm not sure. Part of me wants to, just to spite the Harringtons, but rebuilding alone would be difficult, and now that I know they might have targeted me deliberately. You don't have to decide right away, Samuel said. Your position at the ranch is secure for as long as you want it. The sincerity in his voice made Lucy's heart flutter in a way that was becoming increasingly familiar whenever she was around him. Thank you. For now, I think I'll stay where I am. It feels safe. What she didn't say was that the feeling of safety had less to do with the ranch itself, and more to do with the man riding beside her. Life at Reeves Ranch continued through the summer months, falling into a pleasant routine that gave Lucy a sense of purpose and belonging she hadn't experienced since before her mother's death. Her role expanded beyond helping Mrs. Finch with household duties to include more time with the horses, particularly the gentler mares that Samuel was training for selling to families. One hot August afternoon, Lucy was in the corral with a young paint mare, working on getting her accustomed to a bridle, when Samuel approached. He leaned against the fence, watching her work with an expression of approval. You've got a gift, he called as Lucy successfully slipped the bit into the mare's mouth for the first time. She trusts you completely. Lucy stroked the horse's neck soothingly. Animals know when you respect them. My father used to say that about people too. Smart man, your father. Samuel opened the gate and entered the corral, moving slowly so as not to startle the mare. I've been meaning to ask you something. Lucy's heart skipped a beat at his serious tone. Yes, the county fair is coming up in Silverdale next weekend. I usually take some of our best stock to show, maybe sell if the price is right. He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I was wondering if you'd like to come along, not as an employee but as my companion. The distinction wasn't lost on Lucy. This wasn't about work, this was Samuel asking to court her in his own careful way. I'd like that very much, she replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. Samuel's relief was evident. Good, that's good, he cleared his throat. Mrs. Finch will be coming too, of course. Propriety and all that, Lucy laughed. Of course, we wouldn't want to scandalize Silverdale. The day of the county fair arrived with perfect late summer weather, warm sunshine tempered by a cool breeze from the mountains. Lucy wore her best dress, a sage green cotton that Mrs. Finch had helped her alter to follow the current fashion more closely. Her hair was pinned up in a style more elaborate than her usual practical braid, with a few curls framing her face. When she descended the stairs, Samuel was waiting in the foyer, dressed in a clean black suit that transformed him from rugged rancher to distinguished gentleman. His eyes widened appreciatively as he saw her. You look beautiful, he said simply. Lucy felt a blush warm her cheeks. Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself. Mrs. Finch emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Don't you two make a handsome pair? Now, the wagon's all packed with our fair entries and picnic supplies. Tom and the boys took the horses ahead yesterday to get them settled. The journey to Silverdale was filled with anticipation. Lucy had not attended a proper social gathering since coming west, and the thought of doing so with Samuel by her side filled her with both excitement and nervousness. Will the Harringtons be there? She asked as they approached the town. Samuel's expression darkened slightly. Most likely. They never miss an opportunity to show off their livestock and throw their weight around, but don't worry, they won't try anything in public with so many witnesses. The fairgrounds were alive with activity, colorful bunting decorating the stalls, the delicious smells of food cooking, music from a small band playing near the dance floor that had been set up in the center of the grounds. Farmers proudly displayed their crops, women their preserves and needlework, and ranchers their prized animals. Samuel's horses drew immediate attention, particularly a magnificent bay stallion he had trained himself. Lucy stood proudly beside him as he fielded questions and compliments, noting how he deflected praise to the animals themselves rather than taking credit for their quality. As the morning progressed, they separated briefly, Samuel to discuss business with a potential buyer, Lucy to examine the handicraft displays with Mrs. Finch. It was while admiring a particularly fine quilt that Lucy felt a presence beside her. Miss Lawson, what a pleasant surprise. She turned to find Richard Harrington, his smile not reaching his eyes. Today he was dressed formally, his wealth evident in the quality of his clothing, but the underlying menace remained. Mr. Harrington, she acknowledged coolly. I'm afraid I can't say the surprise is mutual, as Samuel mentioned you would likely be here. Richard's smile tightened. Ah yes, Samuel, you two seem quite close these days. Mr. Reeves has been very kind following my unfortunate circumstances. Indeed, such a tragedy about your cabin. Richard leaned closer. You know, my offer still stands. That land would be much more valuable to you as cash in hand than as an empty plot you can't possibly develop on your own. Lucy met his gaze steadily. Thank you for your concern, but I have no intention of selling. A woman alone has limited options on the frontier, Miss Lawson. Reeves may seem like a protector now, but men's interests are fickle. When he tires of you, is there a problem here? Samuel's voice, cold with controlled anger, cut through Richard's insinuations. He moved to Lucy's side, his hand coming to rest protectively at the small of her back. Richard straightened, his expression shifting to false cordiality. No problem at all, just having a friendly conversation with Miss Lawson about real estate. Lucy has made her position clear on that matter, Samuel replied. I suggest you respect it. The two men stared at each other, the tension palpable until Mrs. Finch deliberately stepped between them. Samuel, they're announcing the horse judging in 5 minutes. You'll want to be there with Sultan. With a final warning look at Richard, Samuel guided Lucy away, his hand remaining supportively at her back. Are you all right? He asked quietly when they were out of earshot. Lucy nodded, though she was more shaken than she wanted to admit. He's persistent, I'll give him that. And dangerous, Samuel added grimly. Stay close today, please. The rest of the afternoon passed more pleasantly. Samuel's bay stallion won first prize in its category, and 2 of his other horses placed well. As evening approached, the band began playing more lively tunes, and couples moved onto the dance floor. May I have this dance? Samuel asked, extending his hand to Lucy. She accepted with a smile, allowing him to lead her into the waltz. Samuel proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding her confidently around the floor. Where did a rancher learn to dance like this? Lucy asked, impressed. Samuel smiled down at her. My mother insisted. Said no son of hers would grow up without knowing how to properly escort a lady at a social event. I'll have to thank her if we ever meet. Something sad flickered in Samuel's eyes. She passed away before I came west. Influenza. Lucy squeezed his hand gently. I'm sorry. It seems we both understand that particular loss. They continued dancing, moving together with increasing comfort, as if their bodies were learning each other's rhythms. Lucy was acutely aware of Samuel's hand at her waist, the clean scent of his shaving soap, the warmth in his blue eyes as he looked at her. When the music ended, neither moved away immediately. Lucy, Samuel began, his voice low. These past months, having you at the ranch, getting to know you, a commotion near the livestock pens interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Shouts and the sound of panicked animals drew their attention. Fire, someone yelled. Fire in the horse stalls, Samuel's face drained of color. The horses, he turned to Lucy. Stay here with Mrs. Finch. Before she could respond, he was running toward the source of the alarm, along with every other able-bodied man at the fair. Lucy stood frozen for only a moment before lifting her skirts and following, ignoring Mrs. Finch's calls to come back. The scene at the horse stalls was chaos. Flames licked up the dry wooden walls of one section, spreading quickly to adjacent stalls. Men were working frantically to lead terrified horses to safety, while others formed a bucket brigade from the nearby well. Through the smoke, Lucy spotted Samuel and Tom struggling to control Sultan, the prize stallion rearing in panic as flames approached his stall. Without hesitation, she rushed forward, grabbing a horse blanket and soaking it in a water trough as she passed. Samuel, she called, approaching from the stallion's other side. Here. She threw the wet blanket over the horse's head, the dampness and darkness immediately calming the animal enough for Samuel to get a better grip on his lead rope. Together, they managed to guide Sultan to safety, then returned for the other horses. Lucy worked alongside the men, her dress becoming torn and soot-stained as she helped lead frightened animals away from the burning stalls. By the time the fire was contained, Lucy was exhausted, her lungs burning from smoke, her hair having fallen from its pins to hang in tangled disarray around her face. But all of Samuel's horses had been saved, though 2 from another ranch had perished in the flames. Samuel found her sitting on an overturned bucket, catching her breath. His face was blackened with soot, his fine suit ruined, but his eyes were bright with something that looked like admiration as he crouched before her. You were amazing, he said, taking her hands in his. Most women would have run the other way. Lucy managed a tired smile. I'm not most women. No, he agreed softly. You most certainly are not. The tender moment was interrupted by the sheriff, who approached with a grim expression. Reeves, I need to speak with you. This fire wasn't an accident. Samuel stood, his expression hardening. What did you find? Coal oil-soaked rags stuffed behind your stallion's stall specifically. The sheriff lowered his voice. And one of the stable boys says he saw Clayton, the Harrington foreman, lurking around just before the fire started. Lucy gasped. They could have killed all those animals and people too, the sheriff nodded solemnly. Wouldn't be the first time the Harringtons have taken things too far, but proving it will be difficult. Clayton's already left town and the Harringtons will deny everything. Samuel's jaw tightened. This has gone far enough. First Lucy's cabin, now this. They need to be stopped. Be careful, Reeves, the sheriff warned. Don't do anything foolish. I'll investigate, but without solid evidence. The ride back to the ranch that evening was subdued. Mrs. Finch dozed in the back of the wagon while Samuel and Lucy sat side by side on the driver's bench, both lost in thought. This is escalating, Lucy said finally. The Harringtons are becoming more brazen. Samuel nodded, his profile tense in the moonlight. They want to push me out just like they tried with you, consolidate the whole valley under their control. What will you do? For now, increase security at the ranch. I've already told Tom to organize the men into night watches. He glanced at her. I'm more concerned about you. If they targeted your cabin once, they might try again if you rebuild. Lucy was quiet for a moment, considering. Perhaps rebuilding isn't the right move just yet, but I won't be bullied into selling either. Samuel's hand found hers in the darkness, his touch warm and reassuring. Whatever you decide, you're not facing this alone. The simple statement, delivered with such quiet certainty, broke something open inside Lucy. The emotions she had been carefully managing, gratitude, affection, attraction, suddenly coalesced into something unmistakable. She was falling in love with Samuel Reeves. The realization both terrified and exhilarated her. Since her mother's death and her father's subsequent decline, Lucy had learned to be self-sufficient, to protect her heart from further loss. Samuel represented a risk opening herself to potential pain again. But he also represented hope, connection, and a future she hadn't dared imagine for herself. As if sensing her thoughts, Samuel tightened his grip on her hand. Lucy, what I was trying to say earlier before the fire, I know, she interrupted softly. At least I think I do. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and for a moment, words seemed unnecessary. Samuel brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against her fingers, a promise of conversations to come when they weren't both exhausted and smelling of smoke. The next few weeks at the ranch were marked by increased vigilance. Samuel's men patrolled the property boundaries, and extra precautions were taken with the livestock and buildings. The atmosphere was tense, everyone waiting for the Harringtons' next move. Despite this undercurrent of anxiety, or perhaps because of it, Lucy and Samuel grew closer. Their evening conversations on the porch lengthened, sometimes continuing until the stars were bright overhead. They shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their disappointments. Lucy learned about Samuel's brief, troubled time as a deputy marshal before he decided violence wasn't the path he wanted to follow. Samuel learned about Lucy's passion for books and education, how she had once hoped to become a teacher before family circumstances intervened. One particularly beautiful September evening, Samuel suggested a ride to check the western boundary of his property. The sunset from Lookout Ridge is something special, he said. Thought you might enjoy seeing it. Lucy readily agreed, both for the chance to see new parts of the ranch and for the opportunity to spend time alone with Samuel away from the watchful eyes of Mrs. Finch and the ranch hands. They rode side by side through golden meadows, the late afternoon sun warming their backs. Lucy had become a confident rider during her months at the ranch, and she enjoyed the freedom of movement, the connection with her horse, a gentle mare named Daisy that Samuel had gifted to her on her birthday the previous month. How much farther? She asked as they entered a stand of pines. Just through these trees, Samuel replied. We're almost, he cut off abruptly, reining his horse to a stop and holding up a hand for Lucy to do the same. What is it? She whispered, suddenly alert. Samuel's expression was grim. Smoke, and it's coming from the direction of Lookout Ridge. They approached cautiously, leaving their horses tied at the edge of the trees and proceeding on foot. What they found at the ridge made Lucy's blood run cold. The beginnings of a fire had been set in multiple locations, with clear evidence of deliberate intent. Most had burned out quickly due to recent rains making the underbrush too damp, but one area was still smoldering dangerously. "They're trying to burn me out," Samuel said as they worked together to extinguish the remaining hot spots. "Just like they did to you." Lucy stomped out a small flame, anger rising within her. "This has to stop, Samuel. We can't live like this, waiting for the next attack." "I know." Samuel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body, but without proof, there's little the law can do. They finished ensuring all embers were completely extinguished, then climbed to the top of the ridge. Despite the disturbing discovery, the view was indeed spectacular rolling hills painted in sunset colors, the distant mountains purple against the orange sky, Samuel's ranch buildings visible in the valley below. "It's beautiful," Lucy said, momentarily setting aside her concerns to appreciate the landscape. "I can see why you love this land so much." Samuel stood beside her, his gaze following hers. "My first night in this valley, I slept right here on this ridge. Woke up to the sunrise and knew this was where I wanted to build my life." He turned to face her. "What I never expected was who I'd want to share that life with." Lucy's heart quickened as Samuel took her hands in his. "Lucy Lawson, these past months have shown me what was missing in my life before you arrived. Your strength, your kindness, your spirit, you've become essential to me." His blue eyes were earnest, vulnerable. "I love you. And if you'll have me, I want to face whatever comes next, Harrington's, fires, all of it together." Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. Samuel, the crack of a rifle shot echoed through the valley, the bullet splintering bark from a tree just inches from Samuel's head. Instinctively, he pulled Lucy down behind a large boulder as a second shot rang out. "Harrington men," Samuel whispered, peering carefully around the edge of their shelter. "I can see 3 of them on horseback at the tree line." Lucy's heart pounded with fear, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What do we do? Our horses are too far to reach safely." Samuel assessed their situation quickly. "There's a ravine about 50 yards to our right. If we can reach it, we can follow it down to the valley and circle back to the ranch. On my count," he continued, "we'll make a run for it. Stay low, move fast, and don't look back." "Ready?" Lucy nodded, gathering her skirts so they wouldn't impede her movement. 1, 2, 3, now." They burst from behind the boulder, running in a crooked path toward the ravine as shots kicked up dirt around them. Lucy's lungs burned and her legs ached, but fear and determination propelled her forward. They had almost reached the safety of the ravine when Lucy felt a searing pain across her upper arm. She stumbled but kept moving, Samuel's hand gripping hers tightly as they finally slid down into the protective depression. "You're hit," Samuel said, his face pale as he saw the blood staining her sleeve. "It's just a graze," Lucy assured him, though the wound burned fiercely. "We need to keep moving." Using the ravine for cover, they made their way down the hillside, listening for sounds of pursuit. The going was rough, loose rocks, fallen branches, and the deepening darkness all made their progress slower than Lucy would have liked. "They'll likely try to cut us off before we reach the ranch," Samuel said as they paused to catch their breath. He tore a strip from his shirt to bind Lucy's arm, his touch gentle despite the urgency of their situation. "We need to be careful," Lucy nodded, wincing as he tightened the makeshift bandage. "Samuel, about what you said before we were interrupted," he shook his head. "Not now. We'll have time for that conversation when we're safe." But Lucy placed her hand on his cheek, turning his face to hers. "No, I need to say this now while I can." Her eyes held his steadily. "I love you too. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that." For a brief moment, the danger around them seemed to recede as Samuel leaned forward and kissed her a gentle, tender kiss that carried all the emotion of his earlier declaration. When they broke apart, his expression was determined. "Then let's make sure we have a future to discuss. Come on." They continued their cautious journey, the sounds of the night forest around them, owls calling, small creatures rustling in the underbrush, the distant howl of a coyote. As they neared the edge of the ranch property, Samuel held up a hand for silence. Voices carried on the night air, men talking in low tones, the occasional stamp of a horse's hoof. "They've stationed men at the main approach," Samuel whispered. "We'll have to circle around, come in from the east side." The detour added nearly an hour to their journey, but finally, the lights of the ranch house came into view. They could see unusual activity lanterns moving about the yard, men on horseback preparing to ride out. "Tom must have realized something's wrong when we didn't return," Samuel said. "They're organizing a search party." They emerged from the cover of trees, calling out to identify themselves before approaching. The relief on the ranch hands' faces was evident as Samuel and Lucy walked into the yard. "Boss, Miss Lawson," Tom exclaimed, dismounting quickly. "We were just heading out to look for you. Your horses came back riderless about an hour ago." "The Harringtons ambushed us at Lookout Ridge," Samuel explained tersely. "Tried to set fires first, then opened fire when that failed. Lucy's been shot. It's just a graze, but she needs tending." Mrs. Finch appeared on the porch, gasping at the sight of Lucy's bloodied arm. "Bring her inside this instant. I'll fetch the medical supplies." As they entered the house, Samuel turned to Tom. "Double the night watch, and first thing tomorrow, ride to town for the sheriff. This has gone beyond property disputes. They're attempting murder now." The next morning, Lucy awoke in her bed, her arm properly bandaged and aching dully. The events of the previous day came rushing back: the attempted arson, Samuel's declaration of love, the ambush, her own confession, their harrowing escape. She rose carefully, dressing in a simple skirt and blouse that wouldn't disturb her injury, and made her way downstairs. She found Samuel in his study, looking tired but resolute as he spoke with the sheriff, who must have arrived early. "Miss Lawson," the sheriff acknowledged, standing as she entered. "I'm sorry to hear about your ordeal. I've just been discussing the situation with Mr. Reeves." "What can be done?" Lucy asked, taking a seat beside Samuel. "They clearly intend to drive us off or worse." The sheriff sighed heavily. "That's the problem. Without witnesses beyond yourselves, it's your word against theirs, and the Harringtons have considerable influence in this county." "So they can shoot at us with impunity?" Samuel demanded, his frustration evident. "Not exactly," the sheriff replied. "I've sent telegrams to the federal marshal's office. The attempted murder of a woman and the pattern of intimidation might interest them where local politics has kept my hands tied." "And in the meantime," Lucy pressed, "in the meantime, I suggest caution. Document everything, gather evidence when possible." The sheriff stood to leave. "I'll do what I can, but be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better." After the sheriff departed, Samuel paced the study restlessly. "This can't continue. I won't have you in danger, Lucy." "What are you suggesting?" she asked, a note of apprehension in her voice. He stopped pacing, facing her directly. "I think you should consider going to stay with my sister in Denver until this is resolved. Sarah would welcome you, and you'd be safely away from the Harringtons' reach." Lucy stood, her chin lifting stubbornly. "I will not be driven away by bullies and threats, Samuel, not from my land and not from you." "Lucy, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Running away solves nothing. The Harringtons would simply take it as proof that their tactics work." She moved closer to him, taking his hands in hers. "You asked me yesterday to face whatever comes next together. Did you mean that?" Samuel's expression softened. "Of course I meant it. I love you, Lucy." "Then trust me to stand beside you through this. I'm not some delicate flower who needs sheltering." She smiled slightly. "After all, I've already survived one fire and a shooting. I'm becoming quite resilient." Despite his concern, Samuel couldn't help returning her smile. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "I believe the word you're looking for is determined," Lucy corrected, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Now, since we were so rudely interrupted yesterday, perhaps you should properly ask me the question I think you were leading up to before the shooting started." Samuel's eyes widened slightly, then crinkled with warmth. He took her hands in his, dropping to one knee before her. "Lucy Lawson, will you marry me? Not because you need protection or I need help running the ranch, but because I love you and want to build a life with you." Tears of happiness welled in Lucy's eyes. "Yes, Samuel Reeves. Yes, I will marry you." He rose and pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of her injury, sealing their engagement with a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, whatever challenges that future might hold. News of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and the surrounding area. Mrs. Finch was delighted, immediately beginning plans for a proper wedding feast. The ranch hands offered hearty congratulations, along with good-natured teasing directed at Samuel about finally finding a woman brave enough to take him on. But the announcement also reached the Harringtons, whose response was swift and menacing. 3 days after Samuel and Lucy's engagement, a ranch hand found a message nailed to the main gate, a crude drawing of a burning house with the words "wedding" or "funeral," your choice scrawled beneath it. Samuel was for taking the threat directly to the sheriff, but Lucy had another idea. "What if we used their threat against them?" she suggested as they discussed the situation in the privacy of Samuel's study. "Make it public, let everyone in the county know exactly what kind of men the Harringtons are." "How would we do that?" Lucy smiled, a plan forming in her mind. "The Silverdale Gazette. My father knew the editor, Mr. Bennett. He's a principled man who believes in exposing corruption. If we take him our story with evidence, he might publish it." Samuel considered this. "It's risky. The Harringtons could retaliate even more violently if they're publicly shamed. Or they could be forced to back down if enough people know what they've been doing," Lucy countered. "Right now, they operate in shadows, relying on fear and isolation to control their victims. Sunlight is the best disinfectant." After further discussion, they agreed to pursue Lucy's approach. The next day, they rode to Silverdale together, taking the threatening note and written accounts of the previous incidents with them. Edmund Bennett, editor of the Silverdale Gazette, listened intently to their story, examining the evidence they presented with a journalist's careful eye. "This isn't the first I've heard of the Harringtons' methods," he admitted when they finished, "but most people are too afraid to go on record." He looked at Lucy with respect. "You're showing considerable courage, Miss Lawson." "Fear only gives men like the Harringtons more power," she replied firmly. "Someone needs to take a stand." Bennett nodded thoughtfully. "I'll publish the story in tomorrow's edition. A special report on land intimidation in the county, with your experiences as the centerpiece." He glanced at Samuel. "You understand this will make you both targets even more than you already are." "We understand the risks," Samuel confirmed, his hand finding Lucy's. "But we believe it's the right thing to do." The article appeared as promised, its headline bold across the front page: "Ranching Empire Built on Intimidation and Violence. Harrington Family Accused of Arson, Attempted Murder." Bennett had done a thorough job, not only detailing Lucy and Samuel's experiences, but also including anonymous accounts from other ranchers and farmers who had faced similar threats. The picture it painted was damning: a systematic campaign of intimidation designed to consolidate land holdings under Harrington control. The public reaction was immediate and divided. Some citizens expressed outrage and support for Lucy and Samuel, while others, particularly those with business ties to the Harringtons, dismissed the article as exaggeration and slander. More importantly, the federal marshal that the sheriff had contacted arrived in Silverdale the day after the article's publication. Marshal James Calloway was a tall, weathered man with a reputation for incorruptibility. He read the newspaper article with interest before meeting with Lucy and Samuel at the sheriff's office. "Quite a hornet's nest you've stirred up," he commented, setting aside the paper. "The Harringtons have already issued a denial and are threatening to sue Bennett for libel." "Everything in that article is true," Lucy insisted. "I believe you, Miss Lawson," Calloway assured her, "and a libel suit would require them to disprove your claims in court, something I suspect they're not eager to do." He turned to Samuel. "But my concern now is your safety. The Harringtons won't take this public challenge lying down." "We've increased security at the ranch," Samuel replied, "and we're never alone when traveling." Calloway nodded approvingly. "Good precautions. I've also requested additional deputies. We'll be investigating every allegation in that article, starting with the fire at Miss Lawson's cabin and the shots fired at Lookout Ridge." For the next 2 weeks, a tense calm prevailed. Marshal Calloway and his deputies became a common sight in the county, interviewing witnesses and gathering evidence. The Harringtons maintained a public posture of injured innocence, while their lawyer threatened various legal actions that never quite materialized. Lucy and Samuel proceeded with their wedding plans, refusing to be intimidated into postponing their happiness. They set a date in late October, giving Mrs. Finch just enough time to organize what she deemed a proper celebration while still keeping the event intimate and secure. "It won't be the grand affair you might have had back in Philadelphia," Samuel said apologetically as they discussed arrangements one evening. Lucy smiled, leaning against his shoulder as they sat on the porch swing. "I never wanted a grand affair, just a marriage built on love and respect." She looked up at him. "Besides, I think we've had enough drama to last a lifetime already." But the Harringtons had one final card to play. 3 days before the wedding, Tom burst into the house as Lucy was helping Mrs. Finch prepare dinner. "Boss. Come quick riders approaching from the north, at least a dozen of them." Samuel grabbed his rifle from the rack by the door. "Get Lucy and Mrs. Finch to the storm cellar," he ordered Tom. "Then gather the men. Defensive positions only, no one fires unless fired upon." "Samuel," Lucy began, fear gripping her heart. He turned back to her, his expression resolute. "Go with Tom, please, Lucy. I need to know you're safe." Reluctantly, she nodded, helping Mrs. Finch gather a few supplies before following Tom to the trapdoor in the kitchen floor that led to the storm cellar. The small underground room was cool and dark, illuminated only by the lantern Tom lit before closing the trapdoor behind them. "I should be up there," Lucy said, pacing the confined space. "This is my fight, too." Mrs. Finch sat on a wooden crate, remarkably calm. "Men and their need to protect. Been that way since Adam and Eve, I expect." "It's not right," Lucy insisted. "I'm not some helpless." The sound of hoofbeats overhead silenced her. Voices followed, too muffled to make out words, but the tone was clear. Confrontation. Minutes stretched like hours as Lucy strained to hear what was happening. Then came the sound she had been dreading, a gunshot, followed by several more in quick succession. "No," she rushed toward the ladder, but Mrs. Finch caught her arm. "Wait, child, you don't know what's happening up there." More shots rang out, then shouting, the thunder of horses galloping away, and finally silence. Lucy couldn't bear it any longer. Breaking free of Mrs. Finch's grasp, she climbed the ladder and pushed at the trapdoor. It opened, and she emerged into the kitchen to find it empty but undisturbed. "Samuel," she called, moving cautiously toward the front of the house. "Tom." The scene that greeted her on the porch froze her blood. Samuel was kneeling beside one of his ranch hands, a young man named Billy who couldn't be more than 20. Blood stained the boards beneath him. "Get Mrs. Finch," Samuel said without looking up, his hands pressing a cloth to Billy's shoulder. "He's been shot." Lucy ran back to the cellar, calling for the older woman who quickly gathered her medical supplies and hurried to assist. "What happened?" Lucy asked Tom, who had a graze across his cheek but was otherwise unharmed. "Harrington showed up with his sons and some hired guns," Tom explained, his voice tight with anger. "Said they were just paying a neighborly visit before the wedding." Things were tense but civil until Marshal Calloway rode in. "The marshal was here," Tom nodded. "Must have gotten wind of their plan. He tried to defuse the situation, but then one of the Harrington boys, Richard, I think, made a comment about how you'd look as a widow. Boss took exception to that, words were exchanged, and then Richard drew his gun." Lucy's heart raced. "And Samuel?" "Boss is fine. He didn't even draw his weapon. It was the marshal who fired first, hit Richard in the arm. That's when everything erupted. Billy took a bullet meant for the boss, and then the Harringtons retreated." Relief washed over Lucy, followed quickly by renewed concern. "Where are Samuel and the marshal now?" "Out front talking. The marshal's deputies went after the Harringtons." Lucy found Samuel and Marshal Calloway on the porch steps, deep in conversation. Samuel looked up as she approached, his face lighting with relief. "Lucy, you should be in the cellar." "The shooting stopped," she replied simply, moving to his side. "Is Billy going to be all right?" Samuel nodded. "Mrs. Finch says the bullet went clean through his shoulder. He'll recover." He put his arm around her, drawing her close. "I'm sorry you had to experience this." Marshal Calloway cleared his throat. Miss Lawson, I was just telling Mr. Reeves that this incident changes things significantly. Attacking a ranch in broad daylight with multiple witnesses, including a federal marshal, the Harringtons have overplayed their hand. What happens now? Lucy asked. My deputies will bring them in, all of them, and this time the charges will stick. Attempted murder, conspiracy, assault on a federal officer, they're looking at serious prison time. Calloway's expression was grim. It may take time for the legal process to work, but their reign of terror in this county is over. True to the marshal's word, by nightfall, all 4 Harrington sons and their father were in custody, along with 3 of their hired guns. The evidence against them was overwhelming, with multiple witnesses willing to testify now that the family's power seemed to be waning. The following day, more ranchers and farmers came forward with their own stories of Harrington intimidation, emboldened by the family's arrest. The Silverdale Gazette published a follow-up article detailing the previous day's events and the growing case against what Bennett now called the county's most notorious land grabbers. It seems your strategy worked better than we could have hoped, Samuel told Lucy as they read the newspaper together over breakfast. The truth really did set people free from fear. Not without cost, Lucy replied soberly, thinking of Billy and the other victims of the Harringtons over the years. But yes, I believe justice is finally being served. With the immediate threat removed, the final preparations for their wedding proceeded with renewed energy. The ceremony was set to take place on the ranch, with the local minister officiating and guests limited to ranch employees. A few neighbors and select friends from town, including Edmund Bennett and Marshal Calloway. On the morning of her wedding day, Lucy stood at the window of her bedroom, watching the sunrise paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. So much had changed in the 6 months since she had awoken to flames consuming her cabin. She had lost everything she owned, but had found something far more valuable: a partner, a home, a future. A knock at her door preceded Mrs. Finch's entrance with a large box. "A delivery just arrived for you, dear, from Denver, it seems." Lucy opened the package to find a beautiful wedding dress of ivory silk with delicate lace trim. A note accompanied it: "To my soon-to-be sister-in-law, with all my love and wishes for your happiness, Sarah Reeves Cooper." Tears filled Lucy's eyes. Samuel had written to his sister about their engagement, but with the situation with the Harringtons, they hadn't expected her to be able to attend the wedding. "It's perfect," Lucy whispered, running her fingers over the fine fabric. Mrs. Finch helped her dress, arranging her hair with fresh wildflowers instead of a formal veil. When she was ready, Lucy took a final look in the mirror, hardly recognizing the confident, radiant woman who gazed back at her. The ceremony took place in the afternoon on the wide front lawn of the ranch house, which had been decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons. Lucy walked alone to where Samuel waited beside the minister, her heart full as she saw the love and pride in his eyes. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but spoken with deep personal meaning. When Samuel placed the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother, Lucy felt as though her life had come full circle. From the ashes of her past, a new future had emerged, stronger and more beautiful than she could have imagined. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Samuel's kiss was gentle yet passionate, sealing their commitment before their community of friends and chosen family. The celebration that followed was joyous, with music provided by 2 ranch hands who played fiddle and guitar, abundant food prepared by Mrs. Finch, and dancing that continued well into the evening. Marshal Calloway even presented them with an unexpected wedding gift news that the Harringtons had been denied bail and would remain in custody until their trial. As the sun set on their wedding day, Samuel led Lucy away from the festivities to a quiet spot on the edge of the property. In the golden light, he pointed to a clearing near a stand of cottonwood trees. "I've been thinking," he said, his arm around her waist, "about your land by the creek." Lucy followed his gaze. "What about it? It's good land, as you said, too good to leave unused." He turned to face her. What would you think about building a school there? You mentioned you once wanted to be a teacher. This county desperately needs education for the children of ranchers and farmers who can't travel to town daily. Lucy stared at him in amazement. A school? You'd want to do that, Samuel smiled. I would, with you as the teacher if you'd like. We could build something positive from what the Harringtons tried to destroy. A legacy that helps the whole community. Tears of joy filled Lucy's eyes as she wrapped her arms around her husband's neck. Samuel Reeves, just when I think I couldn't possibly love you more, you prove me wrong, he laughed, lifting her off her feet in a gentle embrace. Get used to it, Mrs. Reeves. I plan to keep surprising you for the next 50 years at least. Is that a promise? She asked, her heart overflowing with happiness. That, my love, he replied, kissing her tenderly, is a guarantee. 1 year later, Lucy stood on the porch of the Reeves ranch, watching as Samuel rode in from the northern pasture. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the strong kicks of the child who would join their family in just a few weeks. So much had changed in that year, all for the better. The Harrington trial had concluded with multiple convictions, effectively ending their reign of terror in the county. Their land holdings had been divided and sold at fair prices, allowing smaller ranchers and farmers to expand and thrive. The school at Cottonwood Creek was now a reality, with construction completed in the spring. Lucy taught 3 days a week, dividing her time between education and ranch responsibilities. The simple one-room schoolhouse already had 15 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old, with more expected when the harvest season ended. Samuel dismounted, handing the reins to Tom before jogging up the porch steps to greet his wife. How are my two favorite people today? He asked, placing a gentle hand beside hers on her belly. Active, Lucy replied with a smile, leaning up to kiss him. Your son has been practicing his horse riding skills on my ribs all afternoon. Or daughter, Samuel reminded her, their ongoing friendly debate about the baby's gender a source of amusement to everyone at the ranch. Lucy led him inside where Mrs. Finch had dinner waiting. The older woman had become even more motherly since learning of Lucy's pregnancy, constantly providing advice and special treats for the baby's benefit. That evening, as they sat on the porch swing watching the sunset, a daily ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage, Lucy reflected on the journey that had brought them together. You ever think about that night? She asked. The fire, Samuel nodded, his arm around her shoulders. Sometimes, mostly I think about how different my life would be if I hadn't seen those flames. He placed his free hand on her belly, smiling as he felt a strong kick. Everything I love most in this world came from that tragedy. It's strange how life works, Lucy mused. If my cabin hadn't burned, if you hadn't been tracking those Mustangs at exactly the right time. I prefer to think it was meant to be, Samuel said, kissing her temple. Some things are just written in the stars. Lucy smiled, settling more comfortably against his shoulder. I never took you for a romantic, Samuel Reeves. Only with you, Mrs. Reeves, he replied, his voice warm with affection. Only with you. As darkness fell over the ranch, they remained on the porch, planning their future, discussing names for their child, dreaming together of all that lay ahead. From the ashes of destruction, they had built something beautiful, a life founded on love, courage, and hope. And in the end, that was the greatest triumph of all.